Yes, hello friends. This is Bhavin here. We have a wonderful guest with us today and my very dear friend Vihang Naik. And we just thought last week, that we will put together a podcast on a certain topic, a topic that is very dear to both of us for the last few years. The topic of effortless prosperity or effortless wealth creation. So, welcome Vihang.
Hi, Bhavin. Hi, friends. Thank you for that introduction. And this is a topic which is very close to my heart. So, would be glad to, uh, you know, uh, go through this discussion.
Yeah. So, I I will just take the opportunity to introduce Vihang. That Vihang has been a very successful equity analyst and investment banker, and he has delved into the aspect of prosperity very deeply. And it is interesting to note that he is at his heart a very spiritual person and a very selfless person. So he reconciles within himself these two seemingly opposite dimensions of spirituality as well as prosperity, and that is something which I guess I also reconcile within myself, and that is why the two of us resonate with each other's thoughts. And what we'll attempt to do today is we'll discuss about this area in greater detail so that we come up with some quality content that is of practical use in your daily life. Would that be a good idea, Vihan?
Yes, lovely.
Okay. Yeah. So you might just have to live with some background noise. It is an informal one, and this is not a professional podcast as such, but yes, we will speak from our hearts and we will try and cover some dimension of effortless prosperity, which is of significant use and application in all of our listeners' lives. Vihang, I suggest, can we talk about how can we, at the very base of it all, how can spirituality and prosperity go together?
Sure.
Okay.
So, I think, we have a big misnomer, especially in the spiritual aspirants, about money, wealth, capital, etc. Firstly, most of us don't really understand, what exactly is capital, what exactly is the purpose of wealth, etc. For us, money, prosperity, etc. have many connotations which might not be really conducive towards our goal of effortless prosperity. So let me just, clarify that having met quite a few people in my industry today who have a rags to riches kind of a story. First of all, we need to understand that uh, you know money by itself um, is not really opposite to spirituality. Especially in the Eastern traditions, we have gotten used to see fakirs and babas, who give up all their wealth, and that seems to be the only way towards nirvana. Uh, I beg to differ. Uh, money, according to me, is a very neutral medium of exchange. Uh, a few, 1,000 years ago, salt was used as money. Now, would you really believe that salt is a really negative thing, or would a spiritual aspirant really distance himself from something as innocuous as salt? So we need to understand that money, wealth, etc. These are all very neutral um modes of exchange, and as such, money doesn't really. Uh, Money is not really a root of evil and a root of all evils in that sense, because by itself, 100 crores in your bank account, or in terms of stocks or real estate, doesn't really make you a spiritual or a spiritual person. It's just a statement. It's just a fact.
Yes, the way I look at it, it is something uh, as irrelevant as the hair on your forearm. Having less hair or having more hair perhaps has no bearing in terms of the quality of your life, in terms of the quality of your spirituality. So in the same way, your spirituality, I guess, isn't going to get any worse by having more money.
Correct.
Yeah. Right.
Correct.
Right.
In fact,
Yes.
I mean, in my own experience, what I've seen is money just enables you to express who you really are in a much bigger way, right? So, if you're a spiritual person at heart, money will help you create more spirituality. If you're a if you love creating businesses, money by itself will help you create bigger businesses. If you are a jealous and a cunning guy, money is just going to make you more jealous and more cunning. So, in a way, it just helps you magnify, because it's a resource which can be put to use, and that's where that's the limitation of money. It's nothing less, it's nothing more, right? It's an enabler.
It's just an enabler, and it is, I guess, also a magnifier of sorts. So money is going to magnify all that you have with yourself. If you are a peaceful person, you can use the money to enhance your peace. And if you are a violent person, it's just going to perhaps make you violent. So per se, money need not be given neither negative connotations nor positive connotations. It totally depends upon the consciousness of the one who is having that, who is bearing that money.
Yeah. It's and like everything else, Bhavin. In your own case, you would possibly speak from experience that most of these things like prosperity, fame, are kind of overrated. I mean, till the time you don't have it, you have misplaced connotations about these things. But the moment you are in the you get that kind of prosperity, I think it usually loses its relevance, which it had when you didn't have it. Would you agree?
Yes. Yes, it does, and it does lose its relevance in a certain context, the kind of relevance it had when it was a matter of our dreams. But at the same time, it somehow doesn't end up also corrupting one the way it was anticipated that it will corrupt one. We find, we have found so many stories of, say, whether it's mythology or whether it's history, wherein we have been sort of given the message that money is only going to make you worse. It might make you greedy. It might make you corrupt. But when we look at this whole cross section of wealthy people, I can't say that they're not corrupt or they are not innocent, but I can definitely say that many of them are pretty innocent and pretty honest as well. And there seems to be no causality between two. I mean, you will find a cross section of genuine people amongst the poor and corrupt amongst the rich, and you will find genuine amongst the rich and corrupt amongst the poor. So this whole correlation that we seem to have assumed between money and spirituality or money and goodness per se uh, doesn't come across as very convincing. What do you think about that, Vihan?
I completely agree. In fact, I think, like many other things, many other times, we have completely manipulated our history to believe what we want to believe. So let me ask you a question, Bhavin. I'll just, name four personalities in Indian mythology. Tell me, would you categorize these people as poor, middle class, or rich? Okay.
Sure, sure.
You are Jain, so let's start with the Jainism. What about Mahavir?
Yes, to begin with, he was ultra rich, and then he chose the life of a voluntary poor, I would say. Yeah,
How about Buddha?
same thing.
What about Rama?
Yes, same thing.
What about Krishna?
Same thing.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Krishna definitely circled back to become rich in his own ways once again.
yes.
Yes.
If you
Yes.
observe Indian mythology, most of our gods,
Yes.
wear a lot of gold.
Yes.
And I don't think that really connotes poverty, right? I
Yes.
think we've really polluted our mythology to suit what we want people to believe. And, all of these people were supremely spiritual. All of these people were very well-meaning. If in a Mahabharat you have a Yudhishthir who is very just and very kind, and you have the Pandavas who are, walking the path of dharma, and they are kings, they are prosperous. Why do we choose to only look at the Kauravas, who are also rich, but at the same time maybe not so righteous? Right? So
Yes.
it just depends on our conditioning,
Yes.
and I believe that a lot of it has to do with the reasons we give ourselves to stay poor. Uh, you
Yes.
know, it's
Yes.
relatively easy to shirk effort to get rich if you start believing that being poor is spiritual, than to roll up your sleeves and put in the 15-18 hours a day in order to create prosperity for you and others.
Yes. Yes. I get that. So we are using the whole examples either from mythology, history, or wherever to remain escapists who, on one hand, wish to be prosperous, on the other hand, don't have the will or the proactivity to do what it takes to be prosperous, and they do not want to acknowledge that they are falling short of what it takes, and rather they want to simply glorify the space where they are in. So they are creating a case of a person wanting to be where he is by glorifying his present condition in spiritual terms.
Correct. And nobody, mind you, would want you to believe otherwise. It's in everybody's interest to keep you from believing that being prosperous is a great thing, right? I mean, I don't think anybody is going out of the way to keep you poor. But at the same time, you're going to find a lot of interested parties really to convince you that being in poverty is a righteous thing to do. And I can see that especially in our spiritual aspirants, who just believe that
When you say interested parties, do you perhaps mean this whole segment of priests on one side and politicians on the other, for whom it helps for you to believe in poverty?
I mean, hasn't that been proven across millennia that the politicians and and religion, politics and religion, colluding together would want people to, you know, to remain below their means. Mind you, nobody's forced you to believe that, but very few people would be interested to clear the misconceptions, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it then behooves on the person to really start believing otherwise, And if you look at history, even if I have a personal belief, Bhavin, that if you're not able, unless you're able to look at prosperity and enjoy everything that prosperity could offer you, it's very difficult to even give it all up. It's how would you give up something which you already don't have?
Yes.
That's a very interesting conundrum. That I have these days. If someone who's below poverty line tells me that he doesn't desire a vacation in the French Riviera, it seems a bit difficult because he wouldn't possibly know what is the French Riviera in the first place. So I believe, and this is just a belief in that sense, is most of these people like Mahavir, Buddha, etc., could transcend, human suffering and could achieve nirvana because at the first instance they could understand the limitations of prosperity, and those limitations you can only understand once you taste what prosperity brings to you. Otherwise, you'll just be thinking that prosperity is this goal in itself. So I believe that every spiritual aspirant should aspire to be prosperous, because it can be supremely spiritual just to be prosperous, as in the case of Mahavira and a Buddha.
Yes. Yes. And I also have a radical viewpoint there, that, as you correctly mentioned, first of all, in order to outlive your current desires, you need to have fulfilled them. So if you are prosperous, it helps for you to understand that money cannot necessarily buy everything that you always thought money could buy. And once you have enough money and you see that point, that entire aspect is sort of off the table. You have outlived it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have also always felt that money could yet buy quite a few things which could be of use, and there was very little reason why a saint, having understood the limitations of money, should have given away money. He could have nevertheless employed money more productively for himself, to the extent to which money can be productive, for himself as well as for others. So the whole angle of transcending money is about understanding that yes, money can do a few things whereas it cannot do other things. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that you need to become a fakir even later on after having understood its limitations as well as some strengths. You could yet continue to be like a King Janak or like a Vishnu in all his glory, and continue your prosperity and support thousands or millions of lives. Employing the rich resource of money.
So you Bhavin, are onto a spiritual journey, and you want to spread this holistic living to people across the globe. And it's a very spiritual and a very well-minded thought. It's going to improve the life of many people in your lifetime. Tell me, can you do that, without having capital? Can you reach out to even 10 people without using a phone or an internet connection?
Yes, that's a splendid question, and the profundity of the question lies in its simplicity. That this is such a simple and fundamental and obvious point that all of us tend to miss. And if you would have asked me this question perhaps 5 years back, I might have given some spiritual sounding answer to sort of forestall your argument. But yes, now that I have understood this whole angle of spirituality and prosperity being deeply intertwined and deeply supportive to each other, to make a long answer short, I would never be able to do justice to my mission without enough capital.
And think about it, even if you had if you had one disciple, right? Even if you had one disciple to really engage with that disciple, you need a place to sit. You possibly need some shelter. You need a phone. Now think about this. This phone that you're talking on, which you are using, which we are using to disseminate this podcast, to thousands of people, which might benefit, was manufactured because some guy wanted to make some profit, and from Silicon Valley. And it's a great product. I suppose you use an iPhone. It's a great quality product, and you are able to use that in productive use because a capitalist mind really used his creativity to give you a fantastic product. Now, if that guy were to have these spiritual conundrums, whether he should be spending, making profit, is money good or bad? I mean, yeah, it's a good argument to have, but then we wouldn't have an iPhone, and we wouldn't be able to reach people. We wouldn't be able to disseminate our spiritual thoughts. So I believe, to not mince words, it is a bit hypocritical in my view to preach spirituality without and to really put down prosperity in that sense. What do you think?
Yeah, especially when you're using all these capital goods to spread your spiritual message. It essentially boils down to you are using the capital to claim the capital, or you're just using creativity to suppress creativity. Correct. So it doesn't come across as an ethical thing to do. However, one thing that comes across to me while we discuss this is that on one hand is the man who wanted to make this wonderful product, a cell phone, for the sake of, out of his creative talent, for the sake of making money and for supporting mankind. Let me call him a materialist. On the other hand is a spiritualist, or a spiritual aspirant rather, who is again deeply clear about his path, as in where he chooses to be self-realized, where he is ready to pay the price of he's ready to go become a monk or a semi-monk or one of those very active aspirants. But between these two categories, which are the polar opposites, lies that entire spectrum maybe 80% of the people who are householders but are interested in spirituality, and the message that comes to them, especially in the Eastern countries like ours, like in India, is that that your quest for your personal material growth is itself desire and is itself counterproductive to your spiritual quest. So that's a very deep question which a genuine householder spiritualist grapples with. Do you have some thoughts to share with this kind of genuinely confused aspirant?
So you're saying the householder is confused because of what?
Because of the message that comes across to him from the traditional schools of spirituality, that the very desire to make it big in the professional arena is counterproductive to his spiritual growth. It can come in the way of his spiritual growth, and it just puts him on the path of desires rather than on the path of cutting down on desires.
I know what you're talking about, and these are some of the things which really stop us from expressing ourselves fully. I think one just needs to, be realistic, and if one were to clearly just observe, even the way a spiritual ashram is run, right? I think, a very logical person would have no doubt in his mind that, capital, wealth is needed even for the most spiritual purposes. Let me give you an example. In any ashram that you today go to, there will be a few rooms. For building those few rooms, you needed cement, you needed labor, you needed capital. And all of these, and to build that whole ashram itself, somebody needed to, assemble all these things. Now, one interesting thing that I always believe, Bhavin, is that every system in our world today is here for a reason, right? If capitalism has survived for so long, it's there for a reason. Let us take this example of building an ashram, which is possibly the most spiritual job. One way to do that is to have a contractor build the entire thing, a contractor with a profit motive. Another way is to, go for donations, ask some contractor who doesn't want to make a profit, ask other volunteers to give their time and energy to build that ashram, ask a cement contractor to give cement for free, ask some steel contractor to give the steel for free, and doing all this, you will be able to build an ashram with a good amount of effort. However, I think the most, all of these people together won't be able to compete with a single profit-minded contractor who will be able to get that thing up and running in a matter of days. And in that process, he will use the least amount of cement, he will use the least amount of effort, and he will complete it in the fastest time. And you, in your experience as a, you've been to, through these spiritual organizations, you would be a better judge of which is a better system.
Yes.
Right?
So I would agree in that part of your answer that when a single person with a very clear motive is doing everything, is putting everything together, is going to be more optimal for sure in terms of various parameters. It is going to be most optimal for sure.
Yeah, and that guy in the process is making some money. The cement guy is making some money. The one who is lending you capital is making some money, and that's the most efficient way. If donations and were a way to run the economy, and that ashram is a mini economy. I hope you understand.
Yes.
If donations and charity were the most efficient way to build things and to enable movements, then I think capitalism wouldn't have survived. So one thing that the householder who has spiritual ambitions needs to realize is that money, capital, wealth, these are very practical things in life, without which, survival is going to be tough. It's very easy to, get out of a nice air-conditioned car and then talk about how, food, money doesn't mean a thing, right?
Yes.
The guys who don't have food on their table, I think, it's going to be very difficult for them to think about spirituality. They have to think about putting food on their table first. So,
Yes.
I mean, if just to answer your question, Bhavin, if you just opened your eyes and just saw things in the right perspective, and not the perspective that many motivated people would have given you, I think things become a lot more clear. I don't think it's that difficult to understand these very practical facts of life.
Yes. What seems to have happened is that owing to the conditioning that has come across from people, from well-meaning people, well-meaning priests who didn't know better, or perhaps from people with vested interests, we seem to have gotten into a bubble of sorts, a bubble wherein we believe in this whole concept of money being a dampener on the journey, whereas our real life tells us that money is quite a support and an enhancer on the journey, and it is wiser to err on the side of reality rather than err on the side of idealism, because every single day we need to get up and roll up our sleeves and pull up our socks and get our life and our family's life moving. So I guess it's better to begin from a place wherein we see and we honor that money is useful, and even while we are spiritual, we can choose to honor this area and then take our journey forward and see where it goes. Keep our eyes open and see where it goes. And obviously, we'll do a podcast some other day wherein we will talk about what is that point where money stops being an enabler, which I guess even you would agree behind, right? And maybe that's for some other day and for some other podcast. But
yes. In excess, even drinking water has problems. That doesn't mean water is harmful for life. So, yeah. So, anyways, it was amazing.
I think we will. Yeah, I think we will. At that note, wherein we make it clear that there is this other side to the whole money and spirituality story, which we haven't explored in this podcast, but having made that caveat clear, I think it's a better note to end at is also that money is supremely useful, and a spiritual aspirant could actually be focused on being practical while he is aspiring for the higher realms, and his journey could be more facilitated with money rather than hampered by it. Yes, so
sure.
I had asked only for half an hour of yours, Vihan, but I seem to have overshot by 40 odd minutes. I very much thank you for your presence today and for all the wonderful words of wisdom that you have shared with me and for all our audience.
Thank you, Bhavin, for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to talk about uh, prosperity. All of us have our own limitations. I think these podcasts are a great way to reach out to a lot of people and basically share what we have learned over the past few years with our own experiences and with the experiences of others that we come across. So great
Okay.
talking to you, Bhavin.
Yes, likewise, Vihang. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.